Good morning. It's so good to be with you all today. Thanks for joining in and listening. I want to begin by saying Happy Mother's Day to all of our parish moms. Thank you for your love and commitment. Thank you for the sacrifices you make, the schedules you juggle, and the demanding and often invisible work you do day after day to nurture both the children and the adults in your lives. We celebrate your calling this morning and honor it. I also want to acknowledge those for whom this day is painful. If Mother's Day is hard for you, hard because of grief, loss, regret, or ambivalence, I pray that the God who hovers so tenderly over each one of us, longing to gather us under her wings, will hold you especially close this morning. On this fifth Sunday of Easter, our gospel offers us a picture that includes both sadness and hope. Jesus has just finished a Last Supper with his friends. He's washed their feet, commanded them to love one another, predicted Peter's denial, and foretold Judas's betrayal. Now he turns to his friends and tells them that their lives are about to change in a huge and consequential way. He's about to leave them, and things are going to get grim and scary for a while. Where I am going, he tells them, you cannot follow now. Needless to say, Jesus' words fill the disciples with anxiety and confusion. What is he talking about? He's been with them constantly for 3 years. He's their leader and their companion. They've worshiped together, witnessed miracles together, laughed and wept and eaten and traveled together. The disciples have literally staked their lives on this man who claims to be God's son. What does he mean he's leaving? With the hindsight of history, we know that what the disciples are facing in this moment is the end of the incarnation, the end of Jesus' embodied time on earth. They're about to lose the comforts of physical proximity and intimacy. Soon they'll no longer be able to see Jesus' smile, his eyes, his face, his hands. Soon they'll have to learn a new way of relating to him, a new way of trusting that he is still real, still alive, and still present. Soon they will have to step up and embody Jesus' love to each other and to the world. The disciples are in what Richard Rohr calls a liminal space, a space in between, a space where the familiar falls away, all things become strange, and we are called into a deeper, more profound way of seeing. Liminal spaces, Rohr writes, are graced spaces, but often they don't feel graced at all. They feel risky and uncertain. They humble us, and they make us afraid. But, Rohr continues, if we're willing to stick around in the discomfort, the vulnerability of liminal space can allow genuinely new things to happen. We can become erased tablets waiting for new words. We can become teachable, creative, and brave. Like the disciples after the Last Supper, many of us are in liminal spaces right now. As we continue to shelter in our homes, as we are denied the comfort and reassurance of physical closeness with each other, as we're asked to refrain from sharing bread and wine around a common table, as we face uncertainty on a scale some of us have never experienced before, we might find ourselves feeling just as subdued and confused as the disciples. Why is the ground shifting under our feet? What is going to happen to us, to our community, our church, our world? Where is Jesus in all of this death and loss? And how will we find him if he's going to a place we cannot follow now? Predictably, the disciples respond to Jesus' news with a demand for certainty. Thomas asks Jesus for a roadmap. How can we know the way? Philip asks for undeniable black and white proof of God's existence. Lord, just show us the Father and we'll be satisfied. What they want What they all want, and what we want if we're honest, is the religion of the GPS, the 5-point plan, the 10 commandments. Do A, B, and C, and you will unerringly arrive at destination D. But Jesus doesn't give them what they want. What else is new? He gives them something else. He gives them himself. I am the way, the truth, and the life, he tells them. If you know me, you will know my Father also. Instead of a 3D map, a PowerPoint presentation, or a set of architectural blueprints, Jesus invites the disciples to lean hard into what they've already known and experienced of him. To lean into him, to journey with him, to trust and abide in him, even as the world reels and changes. Nothing new or dazzling is required, Jesus says. There is no need for shiny new GPS. What you need is what you already have. The beautiful, messy, ever-evolving, often bewildering, and yet still nourishing business of relationship with Jesus. Of course, when we find ourselves in scary liminal spaces, we might very well hear Jesus' words and flinch away from them because they sound inadequate. They sound ordinary. It's hard to trust in the salvation that's already in front of us when we're busy looking for something fancier, something more doubt-proof, more certain. If you had asked me a few years ago to describe what the Christian life is supposed to look like, I would have rattled off a list of black and white truths as readily as a kindergartner recites the alphabet. So reality has been, how shall I put it mildly, a rude and massive shock. Who knew that my life with God would actually be one long goodbye? That to know God, I would have to unknow God. Shed my neat conceptions of the divine like so many old snakeskins, and emerge into the world bare, vulnerable and new again and again and again. Like the disciples suddenly facing Jesus' departure, I did not know that the process of shedding would be personal or costly, or that it would hurt sometimes, or that there would also be a complicated joy, layered and bittersweet, in the pain of learning to be with God in new ways. On the eve of his own death, Jesus invites his disciples on a journey that includes risk and liminal space and periods of deep darkness. He invites them to trust in a God who says, I have to go now, but I'm still going to be with you. A God who says, things are changing, but I have equipped you for this moment, I promise. A God who says, life is scary right now, but you can trust me. Trust me, and do not let your hearts be troubled. Barbara Brown Taylor, a theologian I admire, puts it this way: no one longs for what he or she already has, and yet the accumulated insight of those wise about the spiritual life suggests that the reason so many of us cannot see the red X that marks the spot is because we are standing on it. The treasure we seek requires no lengthy expedition, no expensive equipment, no superior aptitude or special company. All we lack is the willingness to imagine that we already have everything we need. The only thing missing is our consent to be where we are. I know that it feels like a tall order for many of us right now to not let our hearts be troubled, to trust that we do in fact know the way, the quiet, unglamorous, risky, but ultimately life-giving way of Jesus. But we do. Like Thomas, like Philip, like all the generations of faithful women and men who have walked along this path before us, we know Jesus. We know his life. We know his love. We know his death. We know his resurrection. We know that he means what he says and that he does not make promises he won't keep. No, the way isn't what we thought it was going to be. The way is demanding and precarious, and sometimes it feels like it's taking us in circles. But the invitation of this gospel is still an invitation to confidence. Not confidence based in denial or pie-in-the-sky optimism, but confidence rooted in the love and mercy and power and goodness of God. I am, Jesus says, not I have been or I will be. I am here, now, in the present, in this liminal space, during this pandemic, as the world groans and shudders. Right now, Jesus is still the way. The sacred moment we're waiting for is this one. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places, Jesus tells his sorrowing disciples. I go and prepare a place for you. In language that is richly nurturing and maternal, Jesus describes a God who prepares places for us, homes, rooms, spaces of sanctuary, protection, communion, and belonging. These many dwelling places, carefully prepared for us, tells us that God is roomy, God is generous, God is radically hospitable. God is able to take our places of confinement and isolation and expand them into cathedrals filled with love and new life. And the place where God invites us to stay is big. It is big enough for our doubts, our questions, and even our deaths. I go and prepare a place for you, and I will come again and take you to myself. We have a place with Jesus. We have a place with God. We have a place. This is a gospel for our time, this sacred time, this liminal space. Though we might feel alone and frightened, the way of Jesus, the way of self-giving love, is open before us. We know it. We know him, the one who is truth, the one who is life, the one who makes space and unfailingly leads us home. So, do not let your hearts be troubled. Amen.